Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Rio. Welcome to Top 5 Things Players in GW2 Heart of Thorns love and hate. Now these are things that literally got the entire community divided, whether they absolutely love it, they think it's a great feature, or they hate it, they don't like it, they may not like some of it, or just all of it, just get rid of it as soon as possible. This is a video to kind of list top 5 things that have been mentioned often on the forums, Reddit, in-game, and other social media that rewards around Guild Wars 2. Now, these are not listed in a certain order, like 1 being the most mentioned, 5 being least mentioned. These are just top 5 general things that people talk about on the forums, on Reddit, on the game, and just talk about the game in general that they may like or dislike. And surprisingly, there's actually a pretty nice divide line in between. So let's go ahead and begin. Number 5, mob difficulty. Now, we all know in Heart of Thorns, mobs literally kick your ass. They actually make you work hard for it to make sure that you can actually take down some of them. A lot of times you'll get to face a ton of mobs that are extremely brutal on you. Like, they are actually mean towards the players and they'll find every possible way out there to try to take you out. Heart of Thorns introduces this very inhospitable environment where everything just wants to kill you, attack you, and destroy you. And for a lot of players, some may absolutely love the challenge and the mechanics that the mobs offer, while others, it's a little bit jaunting to them, going from pretty easy and pretty standard mobs in Centroteria and then getting your ass kicked in Heart of Thorns. For the first month, it was absolute pain for me in Heart of Thorns myself, but now several months later down the line, I can take down several mobs that have all kinds of mechanics, can take down some, not all, elite mobs out there and packs of elite mobs without even breaking a sweat. Every now and then I find a struggle if I'm not careful, but I've learned ways of countering certain mobs and approaching the situation from a different angle that gives me the advantage. Even though I am able to adapt to the new ads as well as other players are, there's still quite the divide between the player base on what they think about the mob difficulty for Heart of Thorns. Like I said, some players absolutely love the difficulty, some players don't like the difficulty whatsoever, and I guess at this point it all depends on the player's preference on what difficulty they prefer. Number 4, group events. Now, Heart of Thorns prides itself on putting up a lot of group events that involve a lot of people taking down epic bosses or doing something epic in order to unlock a next event and the next event and unlock this huge chain of meta events, and that's how people end up running the meta. Heart of Thorns wants to bring all the players together and make them run events together and really feel like a giant community working together to explore the jungles and defeat Mortemoth. Group content is great, but it kind of sucks for the players that either don't have anybody to run with, are not on to run with other players at the right time, or simply the ones that just have a goal to solo the entire content altogether by themselves. If you are the solo player or somebody who gets on at very odd hours of the night and nobody is on, running group events makes it very difficult for you to explore or complete any sort of meta or really complete any event out there whatsoever. Heart of Thorns does not offer a lot of small pocket events that maybe 2 or 3 players can take down together if they try really hard enough. It doesn't really cater to small group content rather than big group content, which can make it very difficult when trying to find something to do out there in Heart of Thorns. So as much as I understand the group events are epic, extravagant, and just honestly pretty awesome. I mean, taking down a Wyvern boss is one of the most epic things you could ever do in the game, especially if you take it down successfully. But like I said, as somebody who logs on at odd hours of the night like myself to record videos and stuff, it would be a lot more fun to see small pocket events that don't really unlock certain metas, just there just to complete and get done and over with. Number 3, specializations. Specializations in Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns are a literal metaphor for a double-edged sword. These new specializations add incredible new utilities and incredible new abilities and the ability to use certain weapons that classes were not able to use before. For example, Mesmer with a shield, Necromancer with a greatsword, Ranger with a staff, you name it. All kinds of classes were able to try out new weapons and new abilities for their build. And as somebody who really likes Squirmancer, I think it's really fascinating to run around, learn all the new abilities, learn how to use all the new wells, and learn how to play a nice support role while giving everybody alacrity in the party. While the specializations are very nice, it is also, like I said, a double-edged sword, because now when most players look at the specialization, they rather run the specialization because it offers a lot of group utility and in general utility than what they had run before. So a lot of people aren't going to be running the previous builds that they had run before and will start structuring their build around the specialization. Now, a lot of players probably don't mind it, but others I'm pretty sure will, because now they feel like they're constrained to running in a certain meta for that certain specialization that they got, or else they will not be picked for group content. In a way, it is awesome that Heart of Thorns gave us new specializations to play around with and learn how to build a brand new build with brand new abilities for our class, but I feel like the specializations offer way too much beneficial utility and are way too wanted to allow players to play the class that they want to play. Instead, all you're gonna see are a lot of Chronomancers running around with other shield abilities, wall abilities, or any other Chronomancer abilities out there. It feels like the specializations are gonna be replacing the basic class builds that people have today. And I know players technically don't have to have the new specializations, but with how much utility it offers to group content and in general, it's kind of a hindrance not to run the specializations at this point. Number 2, Masteries. Now, I already listed my reasons why I didn't like Masteries in previous videos before, but understand why a lot of players would. Masteries allow players to do something in GW2 Heart of Thorns and progress towards something. It allows them to reach new goals, new achievements, new abilities that they can use in the Heart of Thorns maps, such as different travel methods that help them glide around the maps of Heart of Thorns. Other players, like myself, really see no point for Masteries. If ArenaNet really wanted players to gain more experience, you might as well just offer players to gain more levels. Leveling something as arbitrary as a mastery is not really a big necessity for me, and I personally will just work my masteries to a bare minimum so I can do the person's story. Otherwise, masteries are not a major concern for me. I personally don't see a reason to even run them in the first place. Without a surprise, a lot of players really disagree with my way of thinking and actually prefer running masteries because it gives them something to do in Heart of Thorns. They have a reason to run all the metas, they have a reason to run all the events, they have a reason to run all the world bosses, and it gives them a reason to do all the meta events and general events in Heart of Thorns. Number 1, which doesn't really affect Guild Wars 2 itself, but really affects a lot of MMOs, raiding. Raiding itself is also a double-edged sword. On the bright side, raiding is a great way for you to get together with guildies, friends, or just other players that play together and run epic bosses to get epic loot. You have to work together in a team of 10, avoid mechanics, take down ads, and defeat epic bosses for some awesome shinies. On the other hand, raids generally just offer a lot of social negatives as well. As somebody who raided in World of Warcraft for the longest time and Final Fantasy XIV, I know that raiding can also offer its own different social stigmas, social negatives out there, as well as break guilds apart. I've seen raids in the raiding environment get torn up. There's a general saying about raids out there in MMORPGs. It can bring guilds together and it can easily tear them apart. Well, it really is not a saying, I actually just made it up, but let's go ahead and make it a saying. One of the biggest difficulties of raiding is that guilds that want to get serious in raiding want to have experienced players. Players that are new to raiding or new to Guild Wars 2 in general will not have the necessary experience to raid. In order for them to get any raiding experience whatsoever, they either gotta know somebody in a guild or they need to have run through the raid before in the past. If they can't run through the raid, they can't get the experience. If they can't get the experience, they can't run through the raid, and they'll be socially ostracized by the guild or by a group from running the raid with them. You're probably thinking, why doesn't the player put together a raid on his own and manage it himself? Yeah, you can do that if you have the enough. You can certainly do that if you have the proper raiding. You can certainly do that if you have the proper skills to lead a raid yourself. In typical raiding environment, a raid leader has to manage the raid, manage the strategy, and usually manage the loot. If the new player doesn't have any experience in raid leading, they'll most likely have to sit out on most of the raid content until it either gets nerfed or a group decides to invite them in. Like I said, there are upsides and downsides of raiding, and the good parts of raiding certainly outweigh the negatives. Not many people will agree with me on that, but everybody is entitled to their own opinion. Anyway guys, this has been my list on top 5 things out there that players like and hate about Guild Wars 2. I know hate is a strong word and I probably should be saying dislike instead of hate, but for the sake of a video title I feel like it really gets a message across, and a lot of players out there really do feel strongly against it to the point of a little more than just dislike, so I think hate is a pretty decent word to use there. I wanted to mention crafting and scribing in this list, but since I'm not personally aware in crafting in Guild Wars 2, I decided to leave that out because I'll just be talking out of my ass. There'll be no reason for me to talk about. But feel free to go in the comments below and add other things that you think players like and hate about Heart of Thorns expansion. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. My name is Earl. Like, subscribe, and as always, have a great day. See ya.